Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Feel free to take your seats, bring your food, whatever works for you. All right, Marco Marinucci here, Alberto Netti with Mind the Bridge. Today we're going to talk about open innovation. First of all, sorry, apologies for my voice. This is not a result of extra celebration of last night's events. How many of you are working in open innovation? Raise your hand. You're trying to do a little bit of sense. One person. So everybody else is probably trying to figure out what open innovation is. How many of you represent an SME? One, the same person. What is everybody else doing? How many of you are ecosystem developers? Okay, most of you. All right, that's where we're expecting.
How many of you are startups?
Okay.
Okay.
Couple of you.
Investors?
No. So we have a pretty mixed audience here where we're going to show a few slides just to give a little bit of a sense of the definition of markets, the market trends of open innovation, but really the idea with this kind of audience is to keep it as interactive as possible. So we'll leave a good 15 minutes specifically for questions. All right, let's talk about, to set the level field here, what is the definition of open innovation? Open innovation is actually being defined by a professor of Berkeley University as really all the actions that a traditional company is doing, is taking in order to integrate the R&D, the innovation is coming from outside of the company. So try to make sense of what are the processes, the projects, and the best practice to have this flow of information from the outside in.
There is probably a very short, good example to explain what an open innovation is. And it's not an example that we produce, something that you know Robert Bosch, the big German conglomerate. So they have a budget in research and development per year of $1 billion. That is not pocket money, right? And they told me, yes, $1 billion, a lot of money, but we have 9 business units. So that means that 1 billion divided by 9 makes we invest, each business unit invests 100-something million in R&D. That is not small money, right? But each business unit have a dozen of projects. So talking about 5-6 million each. How can we compete with a single startup that is able to raise hundreds of millions for just doing a single thing? So there is no possible alternative today where technologies are so transversal, so fast evolving that any company in the world, pick up the largest, is able to manage the frontier of innovation inside. So that is probably the most direct way to understand why open innovation, meaning onboarding innovation from outside for any player, is so key. I don't know if I convey the message. Good.
Why we're here? Because we've been doing this for the last 20 years. So the organization that we run is called Mind the Bridge. And at the core, we are really a marketplace between a whole number of traditional companies and the ecosystem of startups. And what we do is really to try to match the two things at the global level. So building a lot of bridges between the two worlds. Those are some numbers just to give a sense of how we operate. But on one side, we deal directly with at least 10,000 startups per year. Here in this context, it's typically startups that are technological startups, so startups that are venture fundable, VC fundable. We also deal with hundreds of corporates, right, in this management of a demand and a side of the offer of startup products. The core of this marketplace is really innovation, innovation across different industries, and that's where typically the innovation becomes disruptive, is when there is a newcomer that comes from a totally different perspective, the Tesla of the world, they become the major player of automotive as an outsider, not as an internal development. We're based in Silicon Valley for historical reasons. I was working with Google at the time where we started this. At the Google side, the whole idea of open innovation doesn't really make much sense. In that specific world, corporates and startups are by design, really well connected. But once it comes with entities that are more dealing with traditional industry, that becomes much more difficult to be proactive in finding the right solution that would solve a very specific process or products at your marketplace. We're very international by nature, so the other big element of this marketplace is that today is the solutions that traditional companies want to embed in their flow are from everywhere. And so it's very important to have a flow, an opportunity, a partner that is able to validate for you as an entity, the best solution that can solve a very specific issues that a corporate, that a traditional company has. That's why we are set up as different hubs around the world, a few places in US, a few in Europe, a few spread out where there's a lot of concentration of ecosystem of innovation, in particular of startups, as you can see here. In the field of open innovation and the way that we support corporates or traditional companies in that flow has a lot of potential implementations. So you can see in this pretty busy slide. But the message I'm conveying here is that typically to have a strategic plan of open innovation, a traditional company, you need to start from strategy. You need to define what is the potential objectives of this integration from the world of innovation of startups coming in. It can be investments, it can be integration, it can be acquisition sometimes, right? And once you set the objective, to have a specific path of how to understand the validation of this specific project. So we're going to talk about a few of these processes, a few of these modalities of dealing with startups, but really start from having a plan, right? So having a benchmark of where the market of innovation is going in our industry and how the potential disruption from startups outside can be locked in order to produce either more revenues or a better net profit, so more efficiencies in the process. As I said, we've been doing this at scale. On one side, we support, we filter, we accelerate physically startups in all the different hubs that we have, looking at 1,000 of startups that typically we support hands-on from all different geographies. Here you see some logos coming from Japan, from Italy, from Korea, from Brazil, et cetera, in this large marketplace. But one of the key elements that I think is helping this matching is, guess what? AI. So in the last few years, we developed really a platform to help support volumes of this marketplace. So on one side, we have hundreds of traditional corporates that are looking for specific solutions for some of their innovation challenge. Right, so in every given moment, we have these days around 1,200 of those, so updated by them. On the other side of the marketplace, we have all the profiles, so pretty much literally every startups, technologically centered startups of the world. So we're looking at probably take it or leave it like a million items there. And what we do here through the platform is really to understand the proximity, the semantic proximity from what they're looking for, what is the innovation challenge and what is the reason, with the best potential product providers around the world. Providers based at a startup level. And the whole idea is to connect these two things, which is really one of the core of open innovation in general. So maybe we can talk about some of the regional
I think that
implementations.
The point here is that each of you are sitting in a specific ecosystem, in a specific place. We will show you in a few minutes how much the world of innovation is concentrated. And unfortunately, it's not equally concentrated, it's equally scared across the globe, but it's concentration in few places. That means that for all the other ecosystems, we are substantially sitting in a place where the numbers are small. So the new vessels of innovation that are startup and scale-up are just a small portion of the subset that you can find worldwide. And maybe in the same ecosystem, there are established companies that has been relevant economic player for decades, some of them also for centuries, and they are losing the grip one day at a time. They are fighting to getting the same margins, because they are getting slowly off the market. And they have to see a sort of fatigue of innovating, fatigue of identifying new trajectories. And so the problem that we identify is that if you're sitting in one of those not central ecosystems, there are a dozen in the world, Silicon Valley being the first, but there are a few others. Substantially, you are playing in a game where substantially local on local doesn't work. Established companies that are sitting in the place don't find solutions and probably don't even get exposed to the next trends. And the startups don't find corporates to work with, to industrialize their solutions, and to be able to grow. And substantially small remains small, and established becomes old. So what we are trying to do in multiple ecosystems in the world is try to open them up. And again, it's a numbers game. And so substantially, you can see some example. We went to Ravenna. Ravenna is a traditional oil and gas cluster.
In Italy.
It is in Italy, sorry, yes. It's a traditional oil and gas cluster. So we start working with the local companies, established companies, that were not able to, that didn't know exactly what open innovation was, exactly as we were discussing before. They didn't know how to innovate what they are doing. They're just doing what they have done for the past years and decades, just doing what they did. And substantially slowly going off the market. And so we start sitting with each of them. We try to help them identify some innovation pains, some innovation challenges they may have. And we start looking for solutions to these innovation challenges. Where? Worldwide, where solutions are. And in parallel, we have been working with the local startups to help identify some potential partner to industrialize their solutions. So substantially, we are opening each of those ecosystems to the rest of the world, making them stronger, bringing the established companies to the level that they need to be able to work with startups, and bringing the startups to the level they need to become a relevant economic player. If not, small remain small, and old remain old, actually getting old. So that is what we have done. We've done in Italy, we have done in South America, we have done in the US, we have an interesting experimentation with the Tulsa Regional Chambers in Oklahoma.
I want to can talk about Tulsa because it's probably the closest to our world here. Tulsa is a very interesting, similar ecosystem as probably some of you represent here. And the idea is to have within the same platform, within the same support, not just a specific support to the local startups, but also to the traditional companies that locally are looking for solutions to be integrated. So in the same platform that we were mentioning before, we have the ability to, number one, for the local startups, to give them visibility for the rest of the world. So going outbound and being able to sell their products specifically to the other thousands of other corporates that are specifically looking for a product that kind of fit. For the local SMEs, for the local traditional companies, it's the other way around. So use the same kind of marketplace, but to ask to have inbound solutions that can be a good fit and acceleration of their local growth as a traditional company.
No, exactly. So that is the plan. We are replicating multiple small ecosystems in order to make them more connected with the rest of the world. That is the only way out.
How to do this? As I said, we've been doing this for almost 20 years. One of the things that is constant in innovation, open innovation, is that it changes every year. So the things that worked last year not necessarily are working this year. We've been talking about acceleration programs of startups for years. Now the world is kind of changing the expectation. We're looking at venture building as a potential solutions that a few years ago was harder, more costly. That world is changing, and our role is to try to make sense of all these changes. So to understand what are the macro trends in the market and try to make it and share it with the market. So if you go on our website, we have a couple of QR codes. If you want to download some of the latest trends, clearly this is not a contest to go too much in details, but at least we want to give you some hints. And we do this through really looking at the rest of the world, looking at the rest of the market. We do interviews with all the leaders of the industry on a constant basis. Once a year, we congregate all the experts of open innovation in one location. Historically, in the last few years, it's been Paris, so not too shabby. And there, typically in 2 days, we go through what is new, what is innovative within the open innovation market and processes. So what can we learn from people that tried it, failed it, and give back to the rest of the peers that potentially have the exact same issues, even if they're working in very different markets. So you can use this as a reference. Again, we have a bunch of reports as well that can really go deeper in specific areas of, on one side, macro trends, technological micro trends that intersect different industries, or on the other side, really on the practice of open innovation activities, how to get structural internally, for example. That's one of the key questions to be effective from the top management all the way to the people that then eventually are doing open innovation activities. That flow of information is something where things can be excellent or can break very easily. So a lot of this stuff is being coded by us. This is just a snapshot, again, without going too much in details, but maybe we can cover some of the topics
again,
in this slide.
And I don't want to abuse of your time and your focus because we are just after lunch. But again, a couple of messages I'd like that you can bring home today. Number one is, what we are talking about innovation today is open innovation. Unfortunately, internal innovation is something that belongs to the past, and you need to get used to that. Second message is that doing open innovation is not one single way of doing, but there are multiple tools that corporates do use to engage with the outside world of innovation, that are startups and scale-ups. And again, we're trying to map them. As mentioned, these charts, we adjust it, change it every year because new models emerge, old models become old-fashioned. Probably have you heard about corporate accelerators, startup accelerators? Any of you? Raise your hand. Okay, just to show some dynamics, important after lunch. Yesterday there was the founder of Techstars, you remember? So Techstars deployed multiple of these programs, most of them corporate sponsored in many places. Another one is Plug and Play. Have you heard about Plug and Play? Someone is 500 startups, right? So those models, as around since probably the past 10, 15 years, some of them are showing the age because, again, more and more corporate are abandoning and moving to something else. Substantially, there are different ways of interaction. And again, we mentioned there is some models that are possible to be operated just for large corporations. One of them is typically called corporate venture capital. Have you heard about venture capital? Corporate venture capital is corporate venture capital we've seen before. That means corporate. So it's a venture capital fund where the LP, the limited partner, the investor is the corporate. So the corporate is investing his own money into startups. Why they do that? They do that because they want to potentially be in the back seat or close by the driving seat of startups that might be interesting for future trajectory of evolution of the company. So they want to understand, okay, what could be my company in 2035? What are the potential strategic directions that are interesting for me to look at? Because I know that what I'm doing today won't keep me fed in 3, 5, 10 years from now. What should be do? And so you take a portion of this company, not just to making money out of this participation, but substantially to have a better inside view of what this company are doing. There is a small, tiny problem. Then to be effective with a corporate venture capital tool, you need to have allocated for 300 million to $1 billion at least. And so again, if you are a small, medium, established company, probably you may have hard times to find this kind of money to be allocated on the side, right? And so, nice tool, difficult to be operated. Another tool that corporates onboard innovation from outside is called M&A. Nothing new, but is used, again, Google is known for buying a startup a week, 3 startups a month. Not all of them are WhatsApp for 19 billion. Some of them are 40 million, 50 million acquisition. But you are a medium-sized established business, you can buy one, but you cannot buy one per week, right? And so your ability of gorging on innovation from outside is pretty limited. There is a tool that we see is very effective, and this is also can be efficiently operated by companies of mid-size. It's called venture client. What does it mean? It means that the corporate, the established company, become the client of a startup. So essentially entering a sort of commercial, transactional partnership with a startup. The startup becomes the innovative vendor of technologies. You onboard innovation from outside through a commercial relationship. You pay what you get. Typically, what's different from what you have always done? You've been working with suppliers since forever. The difference part is that there are new kind of suppliers. There is a gigantic amount of them. They are scattered across the globe. Probably they are not close by. They are outside of your regular supply chains. And you need to find novel ways called technology scouting to look for them, to identify them, to filter them, and to onboard them. This is called venture client. It's very effective. We see many successful implementation of company of 20 million in revenue, 50 million in revenue, 100 million in revenue, not being giants, and that works pretty nice. You can see something close by, it's called antennas, and I will explain the reason in 2 seconds when I show the next slide. That will be pretty eye-opening, so just spoiling something. But the point is that since innovation is not equally distributed and is not probably likely found close by home, but is concentrated in few big places, few big hotspots, you need to have some boots on the ground close by to the places where startups take action. And that are called innovation outposts, innovation antennas. Many corporates are putting some boots on the ground over there, directly or indirectly, with the goal to, A, be closer to these potential innovative suppliers, be able to engage them and be able to contact them, understand, and implement and test, and B, also for getting what they cannot do through a corporate venture capital, but doing what is called market landscaping, to understanding what could be the potential strategy directions for the company. And then you can see on the left-hand side some other stuff, mostly working with early stage innovation. Accelerators was been one of the tools that's been used for many years. We see that the trend is definitely down because they are not so effective in producing results. There are something new that's called startup studio and venture builders, a new kind of way of interacting on building up ideas. Jury is still out for them because they're very capital intensive and the outcomes are very, very difficult currently to be mapped. And then something that we are experiencing is what is called open R&D or R&D as a service, substantially to try to develop, to doing R&D in a sort of open way. And last but not least, it's called intrapreneurship. Most of the times, corporates forget that they have great people working for them. And you just ask them to do their job, and we don't ask them to contribute to innovation, to the innovation of the company. Through intrapreneurship program is a way that you can getting some contribution of ideas from the people that work for you, know the business, and know who you are. Again, we run many of them, and the results are exceptional. And the first question we ask is, but why you have never told them that you have some brilliant ideas? And the typical answer is that they never asked us. And so sometimes you ask and you get some incredible results.
And by the way, on that topic, intrapreneurship becomes a great feeder for the next stage. So it's core to create a culture of innovation where everybody is taking care of the potential solution of an existing problem across the entity, but can also become a way then to define what can be venture built. So what can be an initial project that with the right resources is so strategic for the company itself that we can put some extra money into it and then maybe starting doing outside resources from the outside in. So it's a good connector between different points.
And that's a great point to put another topic on the table is that nothing happens if the corporate is able to digest something that has been invented here. So there is a big topic of culture. Again, we are not by design open-minded and open to external contributions. We are designed in a way that we like to continue to do what we always been doing. And the more we are being successful, the more we like to do that. And so again, it's critical, whatever you are able to scout from outside and bring them to the company, if the company is not designed to digest this stuff, probably the probability that will happen is very low. And so we need to have a sort of clear mandate from the top that doing this is important, top level buy-in, number one. We need to have an organization where innovation is part of the organizational map. If something is not an organizational map, it does not exist. And four, you need to have a culture. And intrapreneurship, most of the time, we also use it as a tool to be able to, in a certain way, to reduce the barrier that prevent innovation to flow inside the companies. Because bringing people into the equation help them a lot. Final remarks on this slide, and I will move forward, is keep in mind that open innovation is not just about technology impact. It's not just about doing something new technological. But the main outcome is a new strategy, a new strategic direction. As been asked a couple of years ago from the Financial Times is, okay, how do you measure all this stuff that you guys have been doing with these companies? Again, we can find a lot of KPIs. But probably the most honest answer is, I will measure the success of all these activities by one single parameter, the company survival. Because I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure if you do all this stuff you will be successful in delivering results, difficult to be measured, but I'm 100% sure that if you do nothing of this, you won't be around in 3 to 5 years. Period.
All right, why does that matter at the international level? So I think you alluded to that 10 minutes ago.
Again, we have been mapping all startup ecosystems of the world since the past 15 years. And we measure looking at the peak of the iceberg, that's what we call scale-ups. You know, I don't know if you're familiar what is a startup, what is a scale-up, what is a unicorn. Forget about that. But substantially, imagine that there is a gigantic amount of new companies that are born every day. Assuming that out of 10,000 of them that are born every day, 90% of them crash and burn in the next 6 months. A few of them are able to get validated, and the validation typically is be able to find external investors, called venture capital. So we decided to map just the ones that are able to raise at least $1 million, because we needed to draw a line in the sand, okay? And so we mapped all the startups of the world that were able to raise at least $1 million. So we got external validation. Doesn't mean there is something else, doesn't mean there is not something at the bottom. And so we know how many of them they are every day, updated, for each zip code of the world. Give us your zip code, I will email you how many scalers do you have, okay? And again, and it's easy to be done as a job because most of the zip code, the answer is 0. So we concentrated those numbers at regional level. And you can find that there is one ecosystem that is, there are plenty of them, it's called Silicon Valley, okay? You might like it or not, they are there. It's ecosystem number 1 in the world and should be a reason typically. Then there are, moving in the top league, what we call supernova stage, there are 4 of them. The other one is New York. So, West Coast, East Coast. There is Beijing in China, sorry. London, plus Cambridge and Oxford, and Israel. These are substantially a good 50% of the innovation of the world. Then there are another 7, 8 ecosystems that are getting a significant size. And we're talking about other US, again, Boston, LA, and Texas. Then you can find 2 other Chinese that are Shanghai and Guangdong, Tokyo, Seoul, and Singapore. And then you get Ontario, that is close by Boston, substantially. Boston, New York, and Ontario, substantially is a triangle of innovation. And let's make a dozen. Below that limit, we have a small ecosystem. Again, at what we call the scale-up level, we have about 100 ecosystem. Actually, no, there are 50 over here. At the startup level, we have 100. At the stand-up level, we have thousands of ecosystems. So essentially, the probability that how many of you are in this part of, are sitting in this part of the world? Raise your hands. How many of you are here? One, where? Boston, good place, love it. How many of you are here? How many of you are here? Meaning, many of you are not here? All of you. That meaning that if you are sitting, what's the problem here? The problem that the innovation hunters, that are VCs and corporates, multinational, where do we believe that they go if they look for innovations? They knock at tiny doors, or where they go when there is a big concentration of innovation? So they go there. So substantially, the largest players get more and more capital, more and more validation, more and more attention, more and more exposure, and the other players just stay where they are. To me, and this is my personal opinion, this model is totally unsustainable, politically and economically. Economically, because again, you live in San Francisco. If you know the cost of housing in San Francisco, and you know the quality of life living in these big cities, that meaning that if you're not super rich, you have 3 hours commuting to go to work, right? It's unsustainable. It's sustainable if you are a country or regional ecosystem, unsustainable because you see that there are so much disproportion. So there is, unfortunately, a big dangerous trend that is happening across the globe, that is that the world of innovation is concentrated in one place per country. 70% of the innovation scene of France is in Paris. 75% of the innovation scene of the UK is in London, Oxford, and Cambridge. That means that if you are behind the big Manchester area, the northern powerhouse, they call it, it's just mostly a wishful thinking than something that is real, because there is a disproportion. And the other thing that is very alarming is that Paris today is 75% of the concentration of the world of innovation, and this is 30% of the GDP of France and 20% of the population. If I have to ask you to make an educated guess, moving the clock 10 years forward, how do you believe the GDP will be concentrated and the population will be concentrated? And the second question I make you, is this something that is desirable and sustainable? And my answer is no, but this is exactly what is happening. Or we find a way to rebalance, or we are going in a direction that I, at least personally, don't like.
The other piece that I would add to this slide, and then we have one more, we open to questions, because we're going more into the policy world, is that this chart is built over regions. For the lack of cities are big enough that can be regions. We can do the same chart at all different level of granularity. The thing that is critical is, this is the picture of today, and to some extent we can predict how the picture is going to be 3 years from now, based on all historical data, right? There's more concentration. Concentration tend to, grow at the nonlinear level. The only thing that changes this natural growth is specific policy at the regional level, and that's when the acceleration to go from, one level of a maturity as a local ecosystem to the next one can be really accelerated. The study that we're doing now is to try to match how these policies directly impact positively this accelerated growth of some of these measures of outcome of a local ecosystem. Again, a lot of work here. The last thing that we put some points, a reference for you, some of the study and some of these use cases that we're talked about. We do it every year. And this is a result. Plenty more reports, you can download it for free. We do typically at least one report per month, probably sometimes two. This is specifically on the very topics that we're talking about, natural growth or local innovation ecosystem, and how can that be accelerated through examples of policies that then eventually turn into positive outcome. With that, considering that we have 9 minutes to go,
Questions?
I will stop it for questions. Well, hold on. Mike is coming to you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
No, okay, yours business. Ladies
That's
first.
Oh, sorry,
So please
I stole your
introduce yourself.
spot, buddy. Sorry. I was just wondering how
Can you
you.
introduce yourself? Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry,
sure.
good
My
morning.
name's Ashley Bryan. I'm with Launch Fishers, and I'm wondering how you manage through IP situations in your process.
IP situations?
Intellectual property. How do you handle that?
So that's a long discussion. Typically, the key elements of the IP negotiation is very related to R&D. And so in the pieces when we're looking at different boxes of potential open innovation activities, the one of open R&D is the one where the IP typically is crucial. Because typically you go outside and look for potential IPs that then eventually might want to be used inside. This is eventually the core of the negotiation between research institution from the outside and the corporate itself. So it's a science by itself.
Just to add a line here, in the world of innovation and startups, IP is relevant, but most of the time, to be over worried about IP protection as one single outcome, that what you're doing remains in a drawer and nothing will use it.
Yes. Yes. Please.
Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Puneet. I'm with Equipaid, so I'm working on my own startup, and I wanted to ask you, what are the characteristics of the best venture clients that you've seen?
Okay, good question. What are the characteristics of venture clients that we're seeing? From the corporate side, you mean? Yeah. So the best ones is to have a very well-defined innovation challenge. That's where AI can actually also help. So in our platform, for example, we help corporates to define the boundaries of what they're looking for. Because sometimes there is a ambiguity between one department and the other, and it's very hard to do it when there is not enough tools to define the outcome, the reasons for venture client, what are you expecting, and then really the definition, the clear definition of the outcome. Is there any IP issues? Is there any specific confinement in terms of geographies you can deal with for a number of reasons? And so once that the preparation is set, the flow eventually of the outcome that is the real integration, the real deals is much easier.
And then to be able to navigate into a large corporation. Because sometimes I see people, I have a business card of Cummings and I'm done. So, no, listen, there are so many rooms in that place that you need to find the right rooms, the right place, and the right time. And most of the time, one of them is not right, and you are just wasting your time. And you can spend time, months and months, trying to navigating the big palace. Go ahead.
Thanks. Brian Darmody with the Association of University Research Parks. So we represent research parks like at Stanford, but we also represent parks here in Purdue and Indiana. So since we're in Indiana, what advice would you give the local ecosystem to be more robust in this particular area?
That's a big question, right? Maybe we can start with subset of activities. So with Tulsa, we don't deal much with universities in general, but the idea is let's find an area, like a sub-vertical, where your value proposition is stronger, right? If it's not totally unique, but how can I use that best? Because what is happening today is pretty clear to everybody, and the world of innovation is totally global. And all the tools that we have are making this even more global, even more findable. And so typically the first thing that we do when we deal with region is do exactly what we do with a startup. Let's sit down in a very easy and simple statement. What is your unique value proposition? What can you offer there that the next Zippo cannot, right? And sometimes it's soul searching, because then you say, yeah, but you need to put at least 5. If you put 5, then eventually you're totally lost in a perception of the other side of the market. So I would start with that.
Hi, my name is Jorge Romero Day. I'm with Purdue University. I was wondering, as you penetrate the corporate world with your proposition. What's your, especially with the growth of corporate venturing lately, whether that would be your main entrance or where would you go?
Again, from which perspective? From which perspective? A startup perspective or a university perspective? From the bridge, okay. So again, we typically are a bridge, by, as you know, our name tell you, again, a bridge you need two pillars. You need to, again, on the one hand, we need to really be able to understand what is on the startup side, on the innovation side. We're talking about startups, research is one step behind, but again, it's the same stuff. So understanding exactly what is the potential. And secondly, to be able to address this potential into something that might be a potential pilot, a proof of concept, with an industry, with a company, to be able to get it validated, moving more on the sort of prototyping thing, going on something that is a scalable thing, and doing to something that are operations. So that's the path. To do that, we need to exactly understand what we have on the one hand side, what are the innovation proposition that we have, the opportunity of innovation, and to find on the other hand some potential airborne when this opportunity might be interesting for. Typically, we start from the other side. So we sit with the corporate and say, what you're looking for. And so each corporate has multiple rooms, multiple business units with multiple sub-projects. There is something we need to understand, there is a budget attached to that or not. Because again, if there is a business unit with a mild interest and no budget, and I'm bringing this poor guy in front of them, I have one simple outcome, that is losing his time, they're losing their time, and I'm losing my time. But maybe that interaction might help them to identify some potential roadmaps evolution, and maybe we can put what these guys is doing on the roadmap for the next 2-3 years, because sometimes this is the horizon of this company you're working with. So essentially, we start from the corporate side, we start from specific innovation needs, we turn that into practical innovation challenges, we have them to define a way that can be understood from the outside, and then we go out looking for potential matches. Imagine Tinder, we are doing something like that. And again, when we see some potential matches, we start getting interaction, we manage the interaction and try to move into concrete results. That is a pilot. Because they don't buy for 50 million, they test it, and if it works, they expand. This process might take 6 months if the corporate is used to work with all the startups, or 3 years if the corporate is still. Then there's another big topic that corporates, beyond also managing the core, and so onboarding innovation to the core, they also to look beyond the core. They also called Horizon 2, Horizon 3, and that is called mostly technology landscaping. We look at what startups are doing for helping them to identify some potential directions that turn into roadmap evolution in strategic plans, in innovation plans, and then we'll probably create the path for this guy to come into the potential path in 2-3 years from now.
One key element that I think both of your questions are united by is the complexity of navigating the world of corporates. The bigger, the more complex. Innovation is typically, unfortunately, all spread out. Historically, it doesn't have an owner, right? It's a little bit is in research, a little bit is in IT, depending on your structure. So it's really the ability to navigate who has the ownership of that specific function. The best corporates, no matter the size today, are getting organized with a clear owner. There's a chief innovation officer. There's a tag, you know it. So he's the starting point that typically is able then to help you dispatch the requests within the complex structure. So the one suggestion I would have, find or ask for an organizational structure. This is a totally acceptable question when you're dealing with a corporate, because from the outside world is a black box. And typically you end up going into subcircles that are very inefficient. And that's one of the beginning of the end. I think we're exactly...
Last question.
There might be one question, and we have 10 seconds. 9.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Vandelea Radaeli, and I work in LDB, Inter-American Development Bank. You mentioned open innovation with SMEs. How is the main challenges you face of trying to do open innovation with the SMEs, and especially those on traditional sectors? And I've been working on this in the past.
No, super good question. Again, the larger the organization, the more means they have. And so technically speaking, it's easier to work with because they have also the ability to have structure able to project the future and try to put the future into operations. SMEs typically are very, very absorbed from the day-by-day operations. On the other hand, if they understand the value, they are way more linear to onboard innovation from outside. So again, if you are able to show the value to small and medium companies to do this kind of innovation, and they get it, they will probably fast movers than larger operations. That's our experience. Our best customers are probably smaller companies. While with the big ones, there is politics involved, multi-layer, complexity, governance, and so sometimes it's messy, despite they have the means. They have less means, but definitely more ability to react.
100%.
Thank you,
We're
everybody.
out of time. Thank you, guys.